Ebola is absolutely ripping its way through Africa. And from what I can see, hardly anybody is even talking about it. Chris Okamringa is on the ground in Kinshasa, the most densely populated area of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Chris, I got to ask you, a recent headline in the New York Times from Africa said, quote, "We will all die from Ebola." How dire is the situation there?
Well, the situation is very serious. Going by health officials have been saying here, they're saying 3,000, more than 3,200 people have got infected with this outbreak, and 1,400 of them have already died. And this is just within a period of 2 months. You know, the worst Ebola outbreak on record happened in West Africa in between 2013 and 2016, and it claimed 11,000 people lives. And that outbreak took about 8 months to hit the 1,000 mark of deaths. So this outbreak has been described by the World Health Organization as the worst growing outbreak on record. And many people over there are very concerned because health officials have said there's no approved vaccine or specific medicine yet. And that is why some people are really very despondent. And so it's a very dire situation for people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. John?
Yeah, and you alluded to some of the numbers, Chris, but yeah, these reports are saying that the mortality rate is almost 50% if you contract Ebola. I mean, that's enough to scare anybody. How do you talk to your friends and family about this as well? And what precautions are you taking or your friend?
Well, so we are following what the health officials have been telling us to do. They're saying Ebola is transmitted by close contact with the bodily fluids of infected people. So we have to, when we're out in public, we have to wear masks. We have to keep washing our hands, and we have to always report any symptoms. Coughing, fever, headache, vomiting, diarrhea immediately to health workers so that we can get treatment. So that's what some people are doing. But unfortunately, there are other people who believe that this outbreak is a hoax. The epicenter of this outbreak is an area that is very rich in gold. And so some people have been spreading all these conspiracy theories that health workers and international community are kind of conniving to inject them with toxic substances so that they can take over their land, which is very rich in gold. There are many other conspiracy theories, and that has really hampered the response efforts of health workers.
But I've seen the images of the dead. You've seen the images of the dead. I mean, what does this say about the times that we're living in when we can chalk it up to a hoax?
That is something very, very sad about what's happening over there. People who have continuously kept spreading these rumors about this disease. But what we have heard from health workers is that there seems to be a change because of the growing number of deaths. Some people are now immediately going to health workers when they see a relative or someone they know in their neighborhood who has the symptoms. They inform, and that is helping. But there's another problem, is that this outbreak has occurred in a conflict zone. There are a number of rebel groups over there. So health workers who are supposed to be carrying out a very important function known as contact tracing cannot spread out throughout that area because rebels are there. They're very dangerous. They're armed. And so that has also caused a lot of problem to the efforts to scale back the outbreak.
So I know you've been covering things like this for a long time, and I have to ask you because you just mentioned it that contact tracing is essentially non-existent. I mean, here in the US, the CDC keeps repeating that the risk to Americans is, quote, low. But you said it, no vaccine, no treatment for this strain, no contact tracing. What do you think it will take for the rest of the world, including the US, to really take notice here?
Well, I think it's something that Congolese officials, the Africa Centers for Disease Control, have been repeatedly telling the international community. And fortunately for them, the World Health Organization is also saying that, they designated this outbreak as a public health emergency of international concern. That is a designation reserved for diseases that have a potential to spread around the globe.
And last question quickly, Chris, I want to get your opinion. I mentioned the New York Times, article, the headline, but I couldn't find a single U.S. primetime segment on this. I'm going to ask your opinion. I know you're a reporter, but is this a newsroom failure? Is it Ebola that simply isn't programmable content unless it's spreading in one of our big cities in the U.S.? What do you make of it, this lack of coverage here in the U.S.?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't describe it as a newsroom failure because, newsrooms all over the world prioritize stories for their audiences. There's this news value we called proximity. Of course, the criticism from people who don't understand is valid, but it's because they're not very fully aware of how newsrooms work. But there's also this concern, especially from Africa, about how Africa is considered a dark continent where there's lots of poverty, diseases, and conflicts. So it's like kind of a fatigue by some of these Western networks. They feel that Africa always has conflicts. The Democratic Republic is all about killing and looting diamonds, the gold, and all that. So they don't give it the kind of prominence that they would, if this happened in Europe, maybe, or North America. And recently, the director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control said in one of the international media channels that if this disease had occurred in North America or Europe, there would be a vaccine by now. So you can see the sentiment from very high-profile officials that this is something that is a concern to many people in Africa. John?
Chris Okamringa on the ground in Kinshasa. Chris, stay safe. Stay well, and we'll keep checking in with you.
Thank you.